Well, hello everyone, and welcome into a great program we got scheduled for tonight. Of course, Barbara Anderson, Watchtower Insider, she's going to tell all. And she has a guest, Martin HAugh. And boy, Martin's got a lot to share with us as well. You're going to be really amazed with the things you're going to hear here tonight on the six screens. So let's bring Barbara in right now and say hello to Barbara. Hello, Barbara.
Hello, Rick.
Well, there you are. My gosh, you're always looking spiffy. You're always looking sharp and ready to go. And you're a well-prepared woman, I have to tell you. We have 14 programs here on the six screens, Barbara. And boy, I really appreciate it when you come on and you're always ready to go. That is really a bonus. I give you 500 gold stars, as they say.
Well, we have a very special audience, so I dress up for them.
Well, thank you. All right, so let's bring on your guest tonight. You can introduce him. I'll bring him on. You tell us a little bit about Martin.
Okay. Martin's last name is spelled H-A-U-G-H, but it's pronounced HAugh. What is your nationality, Martin?
I don't know. I'm a mutt, Scottish, Welsh. I'm mainly Welsh, German,
I thought maybe that because of the pronunciation.
My family's been in Pennsylvania since before the Revolutionary War on my dad's side. So we've been in America for a while.
Interesting. Well, you sure didn't move around, did you?
Nope.
Well, family's very important. And for all of your family to stay basically in the same area, that's a wonderful thing nowadays when so many people are so lost. They have no family. But you have a large family.
Yeah, but they're all shutting me, though. But that's okay,
Well, you know, my husband always said if you get used to hanging if you hang long enough. So, you get used to shunning when you're shunned long enough. That's the way I feel about it. Although so many are heartbroken over the shunning policy, and you can't blame them, especially when you're younger and you need and love to have family. Well, you have an extraordinary history. I believe we met, I think it was 2018.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, that was at that in Harrisburg, wasn't it? Yeah. Can you tell us what we met for?
You started. I think you started the whole ball rolling with this investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses. There was a press conference in Harrisburg to open up the window of statute of limitations. We know most states in the United States, victims of CSA cases who are minors only have to about their 30 till they could have sued for damages. A lot of states had a 7 or 10 year criminal crime statute of limitations. So Pennsylvania had a bill in the state house saying that we want to open this window up for 2 years. So let's say you were abused and you're in your 40s or 50s and you wanted to sue Watchtower, the Catholic Church, Mormons, whatever. So you were invited. I was invited to speak at the Capitol. Also, you got the ball rolling at the Attorney General's office that time.
I brought it with me. I brought the submission with me, handed it to the representative, and he had his assistant take it across the street to the Attorney General's office. I remember that so well, and filed it then. It was very thrilling.
The sad thing is Pennsylvania is controlled by religious right-wingers, so that bill has not passed. It's been up for the House every year since 2020, 18, and even last year it failed to pass. Now the Democrats control the House. It's passing the House every year, but the Senate hasn't passed it. Josh Shapiro, our governor, will sign it into law whenever the Senate can. The Catholics and other high money groups are paying off the senators not to pass that bill.
Well, things change. They have a way of changing when the pressure is strong enough. And certainly people are really, really hot on this topic. Want change, want justice. And so you want justice.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yes. And so your history with the witnesses go back even before they were called witnesses.
Yep. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So my great grandmother was baptized in the 1920s before they were Jehovah's Witnesses. She has a mother of 5 children, and her husband never became a Bible student. Actually, he was killed in an automobile accident, and so my great grandmother had 5 kids. She was during the Great Depression. She was trying to survive. She drifted away from the organization in the 30s. My great aunt, my great uncle, and my grandmother always told us stories of going to Kingdom Hall before they were even called Kingdom Halls in the 1920s and 30s. In fact, my great grandmother drifted away so much that she took my grandmother and my great aunt to the Army base in Baltimore, Maryland. My mom's family's from Baltimore, and to become Army nurses during World War II. My grandmother was too short. She did not. She was only 4'10", and she was not accepted. My great aunt served in World War II. Met a worldly guy in the Army Air Corps. He was from Oregon. She settled in Oregon, and she got reacquainted with the witnesses. Got baptized. Brought her husband in. They had 4 kids. The kids were pioneers, elders, Bethelites. My great uncle Kurt. He moved to Indiana after World War II. He served, and he also got reacquainted with the witnesses, and his family were Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know the other 2, my great aunts and uncles, because they never were Jehovah's Witnesses. I really never met them. And my grandmother, after World War II, she worked for the Social Security Administration until she retired in Baltimore, and she was also contacted by witnesses in the door-to-door ministry. Remember going as a kid. She married a worldly guy. She had 3 kids. My mom's the youngest of 3. So my great grandmother got reacquainted with the witnesses, helped my grandmother raise her kids as Jehovah's Witnesses, and my mom and my 2 uncles on my mom's side. And my great grandmother actually died out in field service in 1975. They were doing a track campaign, and they finished a street in Baltimore, and they were going to drive to the next street. My great grandmother passed away. The story goes a few months before my sister was born in 75. So she did not stay alive till 75. Sadly. On my dad's side, a little different, a little younger. My dad was 11 in 1959, and witnesses knocked on my dad's door. He was sick home from school. He accepted a subscription to magazines, did not have the dollar for the whole year. They came back a week later. He worked at the farm, and he had the dollar. So my grandmother and my dad started studying together. 11 months later, June of 1960, my dad was 12, my grandmother was 33, and they were both baptized. My dad's the oldest of 8 kids. All of them were good JWs. My dad served at Bethel. His younger brother did. His sister did. I have either all the kids were elders or married to elders. So I had this, I think I have 24 cousins on my dad's side. They're all Jehovah's Witnesses except for one of them. So yeah, this rich, I thought it was rich spiritual heritage, crazy getting together with all these witnesses and all these family reunions on both sides of my family. So that's what I grew up with. To me, that was normal. Jehovah's Witnesses I was always a true believer. My parents did a great job indoctrinating us. I'm the middle child of 3. I have an older sister, and I have a younger brother.
Sounds complex.
Yeah.
You remember all their names?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, some of us have very small families, and your family apparently wanted to fill up Pennsylvania.
Yeah. We could have been our own circuit. Yeah.
I think so. Well, with the commonality of the religion tends to keep people together. Is that true in your case?
Yeah.
The witness part of the family just stayed together?
Yeah. So both my grandfathers were not witnesses. My grandmother was already married and had multiple kids when she became a witness. On my mom's side, she was out, even though she grew up as a Bible student. So she married a non-witness. My dad's mom was already married. So my grandfather on my dad's side was not a good guy. And he was a womanizer, and he couldn't stand the witnesses. He thought he was actually right sometimes. But yeah, so my dad at the early age wanted to go to Bethel. From the time he was 12, he wanted to go to Bethel. This is during the Vietnam War. He had to get his minister classifications before he was accepted to Bethel. So he was accepted at 19. He didn't get his I think it's 4-H. I always forget that's or 4F, whatever it was called. I forget now. And so January of 1968, my dad went to Brooklyn Bethel and served there for 5.5 years. Ralph Walls of Billowgate, the remember the U.S. branch
Oh, yeah,
was
I know Ralph Walls. I
was
knew Ralph.
I knew him. He was my dad's roommate back in the 70s and 60s.
He was an interesting individual. I don't, is he deceased? I think.
I don't know. I don't really. I mean, he was alive a couple years ago, so he might have.
Yeah. I think he's a very executive type position with the
Yeah.
Watchtower the last time I heard, but he was a nice man. Ruby was his wife.
Yeah, so Ralph was the first person to accept the new marriage policy because before 73, you had to be at Bethel 10 years and your wife had to be at Branch or Bethel for 4 years. So my mom and dad got married at 107 Kingdom Hall in Brooklyn, New York, at Bethel in
Nice.
July 73. August of 73, they changed the marriage policy. So Ralph was going to leave Bethel in November of 73 to marry his wife. So he got to stay. So if they didn't change that marriage policy, a lot of things would have been a little different at Bethel for the past 50
What's
plus years.
that due to Nathan Orr getting married, I think.
Yeah. And also, my dad, that was his like weakness. He was proud of having 3 kids, but he was always mad at us because he didn't get to stay at Bethel. That's where he wanted to be his whole life. He thought that was his pinnacle of his life. You'd never get as good, even being an elder, even being watchtower conductor, working on the RBC. My dad always missed those years at Bethel because he was even more a true believer than I was.
Oh, well, he was hooked psychologically to that kind of life. It was an interesting life. Some hated it, others loved it. So there's different strokes for different folks. Your sister. I want to hear about your sister. I think this is fascinating.
So I'll just talk about my story briefly. I wanted to go to
yeah,
Bethel.
we want to hear.
I know, but I want to tell before about my sister. So about my dad. Again, I don't hate him. I haven't seen him in 9 years, but whatever. He's still alive. He's 70. How old is he? 77, I guess. Yeah, he's 77, I think now. He was born in 48, maybe 76. Excuse me. So my dad, I was the oldest boy. He never looked at my sister as Bethel material. He always looked at me. And my younger brother was always the one getting in trouble. I was the good kid. And so he wanted me to go to Bethel the time I was a little kid. So I wanted to run a printing press. I remember seeing a printing press the first time in 1982 at Bethel, a web press. And so I went to vocational school for printing, and I wanted to get a certificate in printing and go and print the Bibles and magazines. And so I applied at 19, and there was a big scandal in my congregation, and a lot of kids were drinking and smoking, and I didn't go to, even though I wasn't involved in that, I didn't go to the elders right away. So since I didn't go to the elders, the circuit overseer pulled my application, and I had to wait a year to reapply till I was 20. But a year later, when I was 20, I was engaged to my wife, so I never had to go to Bethel. So I just want to put that out there. I never served. My aunt was a missionary. I think she still is, actually. My other uncle served at Bethel. I have a cousin who was at Patterson for almost 20 plus years. I never served. But my sister, she married a Bethelite in 1998. So she was accepted in 98 in Brooklyn, Bethel. She was there when 9/11 happened. In 2004, the transportation department moved to Wallkill. So my sister and her husband were at Wallkill from, 2003 to 2018. They were both kicked out of Bethel in 2018 when my brother-in-law told everybody that he was a woman now. And so they kicked them both out. My sister was in her 40s and no money, no savings, you know what I mean? Nothing to show for it. And they disfellowshipped him because she was wearing women's clothes, my brother-in-law, my former brother-in-law. And even though there's no scripture, you can't do whatever. So my sister divorced her because the elders told her if she didn't divorce her, they would disfellowship for being a lesbian. So my family is pretty strange. Yeah, and the sad thing about Bethel, though, is it's not the first time this has happened. I know lots of cases where there was domestic violence, that a woman was actually beaten by her husband when the cops had to come in Brooklyn, and they both were kicked out of Bethel. Like, how was it her fault? She was beaten by her husband. This is a crime, and now you're going to make these people both homeless at like 3 in the morning on a cold winter day in Brooklyn, New York. So that's a little bit of my story. My youngest aunt, my dad's side, Nancy, she married a Bethelite in 77 or 76. They were special pioneers in Utah. They got accepted to the 79 Gilead graduation. Gilead School graduated in 1980. They were in Burundi, Rwanda, Kenya for 40 plus years. He actually died last year in Africa. I think she's still in Africa. I have no idea. So my other uncle was a branch coordinator of the Burundi branch. He was on the Kenyan branch. He was also a missionary. So that's the kind of the family history I have with the witnesses, including Bethel. So I got to see a lot of things that people don't get to see, because I learned about Bethels across the world, how they're not this utopia, perfect place. There was deaths.
That's true. Can I ask you,
Sure.
were your witness family, were they competitive? Did they have a spirit?
Oh yeah. So my dad's younger brother, Donnie, back then in the 70s and 60s, you had to serve 4 years at Brooklyn or any Bethel. And if you didn't serve your 4-year vow, you were looked down upon. So Donnie left after 3 years to get married. He wanted to have sex. And ever since that time, he tried to make up for it. Pioneer, RBC committee member, Assembly Hall overseer, district convention program overseer. And my other uncle, John, was an elder. Pat was an elder. Leonard was an elder. My dad's an elder. So whenever they're together at family meetings, it was always like, or reunions, like, what have you done lately? What have you done? And my dad also lived through me as being a pioneer, later a ministerial servant, and then an elder. So he was like, well, my son is doing better than your son. So it really wasn't a warm, great relationship, or not relationship. It was a relationship, but it wasn't a good atmosphere to live in, because my cousin Brandon would always get in trouble. He's the same age as me. And they would they compare me to Brandon, or compare me to Tony or my other cousins, which wasn't fair, So I didn't like it at all, because it was like a watermelon spitting contest among all my uncles and my dad, who was the most holy or the greatest. Also, my aunt and uncle, when they were in Africa, they always wanted to make big deals. Who gave the most money to bring them back, to fly them back to Pennsylvania? So I didn't like that also.
Oh, somebody posted on the side, love stories from Bethel.
Yeah.
It's so true. Relating love stories from Bethel. Well, Bethel's inhabited by people.
Yep.
People don't change. People, it's not just your family. It's many people who are at Bethel have the similar circumstances. And then there are others that are just alone, and they're only one in their family.
Yeah.
Everybody has an interesting story to tell if you're interested in that. Their stories, if they're your witness, it's fascinating. And but you had a change in your life. You were when did you become interested in serving as a servant in the congregation?
Well, my sister's 2 years older than I am. She was born in 75. I was born in 77. Nathan Noor died a month after I was born. The person who stayed with my dad, his name was Martin. That's why they named me Martin. And then Nathan Noor died, so they named my younger brother Nathan after him. So the time we were little, Deanna wanted to be an elder, my sister, and she would always argue, that's not fair that Martin can be an elder and I can't. So the time I was 5, and I have a funny story. I don't want to be all negative. I want to be a little funny about Watchtower, because there are some funny things. So I told my mom and dad. I told my mom and dad in a Watchtower study once, because my parents did family worship before we had to do family worship. We never missed a family worship, even before that was the thing. We studied every week. My dad and my mom. The reason why I stayed so long is they did a great job indoctrinating me. And so at the Watchtower, my dad's a Watchtower conductor, right? I don't know. I'm like 6 or 7, because I know what Kingdom Hall it was. So I was younger than 10, and I was over than 5, because we were in the old York East congregation. We shared with the Spanish, and we shared with another English congregation. We had 3 congregations in one hall, and there was no street parking. It was no parking lot. We had to park like a couple blocks away from the hall. In '85, our Kingdom Hall congregation bought an abandoned building. We remodel into a Kingdom Hall. So it was around 83 to 85 this happened. So I would have been like 6 to 7. So I told my dad, I said, I want to be Brother Bennett. And he's like, why do you want to be Brother Bennett? I said, he's in charge of all the elders. And my dad's like, why do you think the school overseer is in charge of all the elders? And I told my dad, because the elders give up there, give highlights and instruction talks, and Brother Bennett tells them if they did a good job or not. So he must be the top elder. I really thought the Theocratic Ministry School overseer was the presiding overseer or later coordinator as a little kid. So that's what I wanted to be. Even at the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be an elder.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were looking up to him, and it's good to have someone in your kid to pattern your life after. And it was a way of life. I think if you were Mormon and I was Mormon and we were talking here, it'd be the same thing. It's like that. When people are very involved in not only a religion, but also a corporation, a business, and there's big families, and they all have they all have similar interests.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yours is different in the sense that you were all so devoted, and that life has a funny way of changing things. Isn't that right? You can't count on anything. So here, who would have anticipated what happened to your sister? That was, to me, it's not unusual in our society today, but no one would expect that, especially if you were in this type of religion.
Mm-hmm.
So how does she manage to this day?
She's doing pretty good. Yeah, I still talk to her on Facebook, and she's in the area. She's about an hour from our house. She's still, the sad thing is she wants to be a witness still. She still believes. And you can kill people as a JW. You can molest kids. And they'll still let you be a servant. Not a servant, serve as a publisher. But if you're a trans person, you can never serve again. So it's just, I wish she would wake up completely. But, I still love her, even if some people in society don't accept her as who she is. I have no problem with her. She never hurt me. The sad thing is, though, that Watchtower, you brought up the Mormons. So I have a little funny story about that. So my former sister-in-law, she started as a truck driver. She drove all over the country, and then she got promoted up into the ranks, and she was like in charge of training for all the CDL drivers. So she was credited for the state of New York to become a certified trainer. So she saved Watchtower thousands of dollars because they did not have to send like a 23-year-old young kid to a school to teach them to become a CDL license. She was a qualified trainer. The Bethel, even though she had a CDL, Bethel got her accreditation. So she trained 20, 30, 40, I forget how many truck drivers, and they still had to take their test. She couldn't do the test for them. So my sister and her were sent to Nigeria. She trained all the CDL drivers in the branch for like 3 months. They were sent to several other countries. I think Japan. I could be wrong about that. I forget where else they were sent. So she was an asset to the branch. And when she told everybody that she was a woman, they didn't believe her at first. They didn't want to accept it. And they actually paid for a Mormon woman who was a conversion experience, anti-conversion, or whatever you want to call it. And so dedicated funds were spent on her to try to stop her from transitioning to a woman and make her go back to a man. So, but I thought as a witness that Mormons were the enemy, that we would have nothing to do with other religion. But here, Watchtower, hired a Mormon woman, and it's a woman, not a man. I thought a woman can't do anything in the Watchtower. So that didn't work. Then they kicked her out in the winter of 2018. So about 6 years ago, they asked her to leave Bethel, and my sister.
That's one for the books.
Yeah,
I have never heard anything like it. But that is a story that is not exactly like that. But in Watchtower world, they will adjust if it means that they get something out of it.
Yeah. If she was a random person, they would have just kicked her out, not thought anything. But because she was worth something to them, they wanted to keep her. Because if you're like, you probably know this, Barbara. You were there, and there were special rules for lawyers and doctors.
Of course.
then there were, because like the houses around Wilkill and Patterson were even 30 years ago, $300,000-$400,000 houses, and they bought those houses, and they would just put a doctor in that house because he had kids, you know.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, like I don't want to name names, but too bad. But yeah, so I know a doctor who got special privileges at
Oh,
Brooklyn.
they did. Well, if you had the children, then you needed a larger house. If you were up at Walk Hill, the doctor Dr. Colton, was in the West Palm Beach congregation where we were, or we were where he was. Okay, so he when we moved to Tennessee, it wasn't that long after that they moved up to Walk Hill, and he had 3 children. I believe there was a 4th. Okay. And
I
so
might have met them. There was a yard sale when my sister was at Wallkill 20 years ago, and there was this really nice house, and the doctor lived there with a bunch of little kids. You know, I mean,
that would be the next bunch. This is a long time ago. He said,
okay.
Yeah, but that they had those houses for families. But when the kids were grown and they went their separate ways, in his case, one of the daughters went pioneering. Another daughter went into missionary work, married a fellow, and they both went to Gilead. The 2 boys became Bethelites, and then the parents were still there, but they had to move out of the house. They chose to become Bethelites. They weren't considered that. They were volunteers, and they were on salary. And so when they became Bethelites, then they got the allowance that all Bethelites, and then they had a general Bethel room, which they didn't mind because they were getting older and they to keep upkeep of the house, so it was hard. So they definitely make exceptions to rules to get what they want, but it's up. I know you're not critical. We're not. Yeah. We're just saying this is a life that people have, and you adjust the rules to keep the whole place running. Well, you need all sorts of people to keep such a huge enterprise running. So I found it very interesting, more than I did was I critical. And so in your case, I find your history fascinating. I didn't have a history of those in the witnesses. So now you talked about the wanting to be an elder. And how long were you? You reached out. You had to become a trained. You had to be trained as an MS.
Yeah. So because of what happened as a teenager with my congregation, the elders in my home congregation were never going to put me a ministerial servant because, you know, the school overseer, his son was smoking marijuana. I went and told on him. He was upset about that. And the presiding overseer's kid was also drinking and doing some other stuff. So I knew I was never going to be appointed a ministerial servant at my home congregation. So I was 20. My wife and I got married. We both were regular pioneering. So we moved to another congregation. And within 6 months, I was a ministerial servant at a new congregation. So I had, actually, no, I was 21 when I was appointed a ministerial servant. Yeah. So it was a little more than 6 months after I got married and I moved into the congregation. So we were in Lancaster County, Amish territory, for work, 97, 98, 99. 99, the printing company I was working for went out of business. So I moved back to York, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. I got a job here. I've been at the same job for 25 years now here in York, Pennsylvania, at the same printing place. So I came back to my home congregation, Red Lion, Pennsylvania, the congregation that my dad grew up in, and my aunts and uncles and my grandmother. They had all moved away except for one uncle, and my grandmother still were in that congregation. So I was made a ministerial servant in Ephrata. Of course, I transferred over to Red Lion in 99. And I was there, my wife was pioneering. I was pioneering. 2000, she got pregnant. She got really sick. And she went off the pioneer list. I went off the pioneer list same time. So I pioneered 5 years the first time. 95 to 2000. And we had 2 kids in 2 years. Didn't plan it, it happened, whatever. And we'll get to why, but basically, I was a ministerial servant for 12 years. I should have been appointed elder earlier. It doesn't matter. My dad was appointed at 25. My one cousin was appointed at 26. My other uncles were appointed in their 20s, but I was 34 when I was appointed elder because what happened to my daughter, my daughter was abused in the Kingdom Hall in 2005. I would have been 28 at the time. And they didn't call the branch. They didn't talk to the circuit overseer. I got so mad that I actually called the branch. And we'll talk more about this later when we get to it. So because I called the branch, I got called in by the other elders. They almost deleted me as a ministerial servant just for calling the branch, for going over their authority or whatever their head. I was taken off all privileges. I no longer did territories and punishment. They didn't let me give talks for 6 months. And in 2011, the circuit overseer was there, and no, 2009, excuse me, 2010. Circuit overseer was there. I was sick. I had the flu, so I missed the meeting. So that circuit overseer's personal rule was if you missed one meeting during his visit, he would not appoint you. You had to be there at all the meetings. Because I was told like 6 months later, and spring of 2011, you better be at all the meetings. The elders told me that you better be at all the meetings this time. I said I can't. They're like, why? Why are you going to miss a meeting? We could have appointed you 6 months ago in 2010. I said my sister invited me to Gilly graduation at Patterson. I'm going to miss his meeting. I can't miss Pat. That's a privilege, right? My sister was still at Wallkill, and back then I don't know what the arrangement is. All the Patterson people they could go to. They switched it up. Brooklyn got to go. Wallkill got to go. So my sister didn't get to go to Patterson. So I talked to the circuit overseer, and I said, hey, I'm going to miss one of your meetings. Really sorry. I said my sister invited me to Gilly graduation. I'll be back Sunday. And he said, I would miss my meeting for Gilly graduation. It's okay. So he did appoint me as an elder. I was 34. I just turned 34 on April 1st, Fool's Day, 2011. My first elders meeting, my first quarterly elders meeting, the elders told me if I didn't call the branch, 6 years earlier, I would have been appointed an elder years ago. But they were punishing me because I wasn't following theocratic arrangement, even though I'm not the one who abused the kid. It was my daughter was abused by a known pedophile in the congregation. So it is what it is. So I was an elder. I was a service overseer, congregation group overseer. I loved service, loved going door to door. And I did pretty good as an elder. I wasn't perfect, but I got to disfellowship some people. I got to reinstate some people. Did some shepherding calls. Got a couple of people reactivated. So an average elder, I guess. And in 2015, my wife, started questioning the faith, and she took her 6 months to wake me up. So I was an elder exactly for 5 years. April 12th, 2016, I was deleted as an elder for apostasy.
Well,
that's a lot to take in. Sorry.
Oh, it was your life. It was all of our lives. Majority of people listening, it was our lives. And so we respect you for it. And but it's a different world now in the organization. I was thinking before when you mentioned about the truck driver and the woman or the trans or whatever. There's so many changes made in the organization that years ago, what you said was the truth of the matter. You couldn't break these certain rules, but things have changed dramatically. We won't be surprised at the coming changes because we're expecting them, because they are changing the entire makeup of the organization. But organizations have a way of changing too, that you change with the times.
Well, do you remember going over the Proclaimer's book, which I know you worked on a Proclaimer's book. So they would talk about in the 1920s and 30s how they used phonographs, and they would actually hand sermon cards, because Rutherford thought the average publisher was so stupid that they couldn't witness to somebody. So he wanted to talk. So you would actually bring a record player up, and you would actually play a record, a sermon.
That's right.
Hand them a card, and they would read the card and then say, would you like some magazines? That was the level of training they had 100 years ago. So we during the 90s, we would actually go over the Proclaimer's book and instruction talk. Each week, an elder or servant would have a 15-minute instruction talk based on the Proclaimer's book. We went through the entire book, all 800 pages. And the brothers would always say, see how better trained we are. We can debate, we can reason, we can open their Bibles up. It just shows the light's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. So even though my wife took me 6 months to wake me up, I had problems in 2015 because we were degressing. We were going back to the simpler things. And in the 2010s, when Jairus died and Booth and Barry and Barr were getting older and they all died, it's like they got more milkish. It wasn't deep prophecies of Revelation or Ezekiel or Daniel. It was all about how you feel good and how to do it. So my wife and I joined the Nepali group in there's a lot of Nepali refugees in Pennsylvania. I think it was 2013 or 2014 we joined the Nepali group, and we were playing Nepali videos. But at the same time, people were encouraged to get iPads or tablets, Galaxy tablets, and play videos at the door. And I'm like, why are we doing this? We're going backwards.
Yeah.
We're going. This is 100 years ago. We're not debating people. We're not engaging people. We're just showing this feel-good video here. And I really didn't like showing videos at the door. It didn't feel comfortable to me. Like the cart witness thing, I did it. I didn't like that either because it was like standing with a sandwich board, religion's a snare and a rack in front of the Catholic Church in the 1930s. It felt the same. It wasn't. We were just standing there. A 2x4 could do the exact same thing as a publisher. I'm a publisher. I'm here to help people because I love debating people about the Bible. Oh, I would love to prove people wrong in their Bible. That was my greatest thing to do at the door. So that's the changes. And also I have an iPhone. So when the iPad came out in 2010, I bought the iPad the first day, right? So I was a ministerial. No, I was an elder. I was a ministerial servant in 2010, elder in 2011. Excuse me. When I get my facts right, in case my mom's watching, she calls me lying. Yeah, my mom will just. She's a wicked person. So so I made them the one interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer. I said my parents had to wait for me when I died spiritually, and to this day, 8 years later, she can't let it go. She thinks I'm lying. They had to wait, whatever. So I started using my iPad on stages, right, in 2010. And one elder took me aside and said, don't use that. That's not good. So like a few weeks later, we got letters saying you can't use tablets on the stage. It's ostentatious. And I went to the elder. I'm like, dude, you are so right. Man, I'm so wrong. I am so sorry for using this iPad on stage. So I wish I would have kept these letters. Like the flip-flopping is crazy. Well, somebody did the math at Wallkill and realized we can save millions of dollars if everybody gets tablets. So from 2012, it was forbidden, 2011, then all of a sudden in 2013, it's a free-for-all go. And everybody had tablets, everybody had iPads within a couple of years. For instance, I know I'm getting off target tangent here, Barbara. Funny little story, I love numbers. So I was the service overseer. So service overseer is in charge of ordering all the literature. And our congregation had 97 publishers. I ordered 225 study copies because you needed one for every person. People had lost them, and you always needed extras for new people showing up, right? So in 2013, for instance, we would use 200 easily study copies a month, and maybe had 10 left over, 5 left over. Sometimes we ran out because some people would lose their study copies three meetings in a row, or 4 meetings, And so by 2016, when I left, in those 2.5 years, or 3 years, I kept cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back. The last thing I cut it back to was 50 study copies for the whole congregation. We weren't even using 50. I was throwing away half of them. We always kept a couple for the library because everybody was on iPads. So think of all the millions of dollars in printing they saved. If every congregation went from 200 or 300 study copies to 25, 50, so that's why they flip-flopped, they changed it. The TDs came in 2014 during the zone meeting. And here's another corruption thing I want to get to later with the RBC. We were not allowed as elders to go to Walmart or Amazon or Target or Best Buy and buy a big screen TV. We were not allowed to do that. We had to buy the TVs through their website, and they were more expensive. And why is that? Because somebody made money. There was money to be changed. And the other elders were so okay with that. I was upset, but one elder would not let it go. Every meeting he brought up, this is BS. He didn't say BS, but you know how it is. So that was the change. So I started seeing, we made fun of televangelists my whole life in the 80s and 90s growing up. Now we're watching televangelists on the television.
Yeah, I really appreciate your observations here because and I hope others do too. Many of us left the organization earlier,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't see any of that. My remembrance are of the door-to-door work the way it was until apparently around 2014. In 2004, there was an announcement. I remember being told that their entire organization would be different by 2014. I kind of thought it was going to be a digital organization, and certainly that's true, but I never appreciated how dramatically different until someone like you lays it all out, and then you go, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what a humongous change in a group. They went almost, and I'm not contrasting dark and night. I'm contrasting it from so completely opposite. Hands-on, we were so hands-on teaching. Teaching, we lived and breathed being able to teach. And
So
it's gone.
my wife, the Imitate Their Faith book is a fan fiction book. And I came out right before I woke up, and we studied that in the Kingdom Hall. And there was no references in that book. It's all eventually, maybe it was fan fiction written by the Bible about imitating their faith, about different stories of Cain and Abel, and they probably went down, saw the burning sword. Evidently, there's no scriptures in the Bible. It's all how do you make you feel? It's all because we also made fun of other religions, how they tickled the ears of their members and they just gave you feel good sermons. That's what Watchtower turned into. It was to scare people and to make them feel good about themselves, how they're elite, they're special, they're smarter, and they're better than the average person in the world today.
Perhaps somebody who was inside at the decision maker level, one of these days we'll listen to them to say exactly why that happened. But from my recollection of the age of the writers when I was there, they were old then. There were a few newer ones brought in, but they're really, that's 30 years ago. They're old people, and so many are deceased. Where do you find people to replicate what the deceased people did? How to write according to Watchtower standards. See, so you can't replace that. Maybe you could if you took some people from outside and brought them in who, like you, are well trained and could continue. But there must have been so much that we don't know at the top that was going on with the old time governing body dying, and nobody knew how to continue the same type of organization. That's my surmising of this.
So my uncle Leonard, he started pioneering at 15. So he married my dad's younger sister, Nancy. His name was Leonard Ellis. He was from Iowa. He started pioneering at 15, got accepted at Bethel at 18, went to Brooklyn at 19, married my aunt, became a special pioneer, went to Gilead, was a missionary for a couple of years in Kenya, then got accepted to Kenya branch, became a branch coordinator in Burundi, branch member in Kenya, died last May, about almost 2 years ago now, May of 2022. Did not know until like a month or two later, was not invited to the Zoom funeral, which is fine. So he told me when he was in America, he was also director of the corporation too, I should say that. So he got the vote. Do you remember going to Jersey City?
Oh, yes.
For the annual meeting? They stopped doing that. They had the vote for secretary when Sidlick and Henschel was still president and vice president. This is before the 2001 when the branch committee, up to 2001, 2000, there was no branch committee in the United States. The governing body was the branch committee, basically. So they separated the governing body away from the Christian congregation. Well, they actually started the Christian congregation at that time, whatever. I digress. So Leonard he'd vote. I'd be at Jersey City a couple times, and he voted for who Secretary, Treasury, Vice President, or President was, because he was the director of the corporation. My uncle was. So he talked about the writing, and so the Awake magazine used to have correspondent articles. So the correspondent in Finland, correspondent in Burundi, where he was, and he told me that those usually were branch members, not always, but sometimes they were missionaries, but they were people who the Watchtower could trust. So he wrote an article for the Awake magazine about local wildlife in Burundi, and it took him like 3 months to do it, off and on. And they kept sending it back for revisions. It wasn't up to their standards, and he didn't tell it when it came out. He told it years later that he had the privilege and how hard it was. So so my uncle did write for the magazine, 25 years ago. It doesn't really matter now. He's dead, but like they wanted a higher quality, I thought, back then than they accept now.
Well, since they
I'm a little cold too. Sorry about that.
okay. Since they didn't put an Awake magazine out for almost over 2 years.
Yeah.
So was it primarily because they didn't have writers to write the articles? We don't know for sure, but we could only suppose. However, the organization is gone that we know of, that we knew of. And maybe those who are newly out of it and they're young, they don't know that organization that we did. So to them, maybe this is a bit boring, but those who are older listening, they're probably shaking their head, about what you're saying. It's good to review.
Yeah, in like 2007, when the iPhone came out, there was a skit on the circuit assembly, and it wasn't our local assembly. This was promoted from headquarters. How they made fun of the iPhone. They called it the My Phone, and how bad and evil it was. That's what they did in 2007. I remember that skit. I felt bad because I bought an iPhone in 2008. It was like a year old when I bought my first one, so I felt bad. I bought an iPhone. This is demonic, But now every movie, every skit, every single little thing, they have smartphones and Samsung Androids and iPhones. So now they don't, people aren't going to remember that from 15, 17 years ago.
Well, I suppose Rutherford felt that using the Victrola was progressive. As the world turns, so does a watchtower. And, life is like a soap opera.
Maybe Jehovah's Celestial Chariot is out of a line and it's going in a big circle and it's just coming right back around. It's not going straight. I don't know.
Well, your guess is good as mine, but I don't see their seeing the growth that they saw, especially in the 80s. So they're trying to figure out a direction to go in. Isn't that the way with our entire world today, the culture today? It's trying to find itself which way to go. But that's throughout history. That's nothing new. And it is not a symbol or a symptom of Armageddon. It's just historicity. It's just...
Yeah. So a little fun fact in printing history. Gutenberg invented the movable type, and Chinese also did it separately, because of course they did. So 1548, first thing was printed on movable type was a Gutenberg Bible. So basically printing hadn't changed much from 1548 to 1807. So you had one pressman had to set the type by hand. He had to roll a sheet of paper in by hand. He had to crank it down, roll ink onto the type, crank down, because I'm a pressman, I know this stuff, and then unroll the sheet. He could do maybe 60, 70 pages an hour. A German company for the not New York Times, the London Times, they wanted a steam-powered press. So a German company, Coating and Barrow, they're still in business today. I still run their press. They made the first steam-powered printing press in 1807. It could print 800 sheets an hour, which is like revolutionary. Because the amount of, back in 1807, only about 20, 30% of the people in England could read. But by 1897, it was the opposite. It was about 90% of the population could read the newspaper industry went through here, magazines, so they couldn't print enough newspapers by hand. So the pressmen all over England in 1807 were so upset that this machine was going to put them out of business, that they actually burned the entire newspaper building down in London in 1807. So they rebuilt it. They got the KBA guys, the Coating and Bearing came over and refixed the press. And I saw it when I was in Germany 10 years ago for training. They have a replica of what it looks like from 1807. So to them, in that time, people call them Luddites. They were so scared that technology was going to change the future and the world. It wasn't going to be the world, but it's just different. It's just a different, thing. Is it better? Is it worse? Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to live in 1807. That's for sure. I don't want to live in 1907, but
Yeah. Well, you just have to change your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Because we're still learning. The publishing industry has gone through a tremendous transition, hasn't it? All of the publishing, the newspaper industry, with how we get our news, and the television, now the streaming. And
I got lucky at my job because I just happened. The first three printing companies I work for are all out of business now. I just happened to get a job in '99 into packaging, and packaging printing is still doing great. There's all we print is boxes, but we print soap boxes and deodorant boxes and crayon boxes and Harry's and Dollar Shave Club razor boxes. I print tablets for covers for Mead, plastic and paper.
Every time I open a box, I'm going to think of you.
Yeah.
You glue them they're too tight.
I can't even
get a little box open.
That's not me. I just print them. I print them. They take them over. They die cut them into the shape, and then there's another machine called a folder gluer. It's about 80 feet long. They fold it and glue it into what it needs to be. And then I don't do that. I just print them. Last night I printed a cracker. I printed a cracker box last night. I worked third shift last night. So next time you buy a box of crackers, what were they called? Crunchmaster crackers. We print a lot of them. So,
do they give tours of that industry where?
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah.
That would be fascinating to see all the different types. I mean, boxes are all different. So how do you get structure? That's what happened with the Watchtower. They just couldn't keep up anymore, and the demand changed, didn't it? The demand for.
Well, one time Brooklyn had 20 presses, right? And then Wilkie was putting the magazines, right? Then Brooklyn got rid of all the presses, now all the magazines are printed on one-man rolling litho-man. Now it's a lot faster and a lot bigger than the older web presses they used to have. Watchtower was not always in with technology, so going back to printing with Brooklyn, they did rotary presses, which were web presses, but they were still letterpress. They were raised type. You had to set the type by hand. You had to raise it up. Offset printing, which is the standard today, you have a photographic plate. Now it comes out of a computer. For 30 years, 40 years, you had to strip film and bake the plate. Watchtower didn't want to switch over to offset printing. People were so stuck in their ways. They did rotary printing, and it was so inefficient, and it was so bad quality, and that's why they were only two colors, the magazines, because it was black and white, and then maybe a pink or ugly green, or a purple, blue. They would switch up the Kingdom Ministries.
I remember. Yeah.
And 86 is when they switched to 4-color process. A fun fact about that: so to cheap money, Watchtower could have done all 32 pages 4-color, right? In Watchtower. I'm sorry, I should not have started about printing because I can talk about printing all day.
Oh, so it's interesting
but to save money. So look at a Watchtower from 86 until like 2015. So you have 32 pages. You got 4 pages of 4-color, 4 pages of black and white, 4 pages of 4-color, 4 pages of black and white. Why is that? To save money, Watchtower bought a 5-color press. The first web was black over black. The second web was 4 over 4, and they all got folded together. Even in 2004, when they bought the new Man Rollins web presses, they could have went all 4-color because they only bought a 4-unit press, but it was a double wide, so it was printing 64 pages at once instead of two 16-pagers folded together. And I kept asking my sister on Bethelites, said, "Well, okay, why aren't we going 4-color? It's stupid. You'd have a 4-color picture here and a black and white picture here. crossover. Like it looked dumb, and they're like, oh, you know, it was to save money. It was not because they didn't want to print the ink. Four color costs more money than black ink only.
Yeah.
So I always, that drove me crazy. It drove me crazy. They made a video about printing in Wallkill, how it was perfect. I found books. Remember the United Worship book? The
Yes.
cover was upside down. A whole case, the cover upside down. My dad worked in machine bindery. They sewed on 10,000 Portuguese covers of truth books onto 10,000 Spanish books. So the supervisor was so mad. He made every person in that line work Saturday and Sunday, couldn't go to their meetings. They had to hand cut all the covers off and restitch them onto the new books. And they could not wait till next week to get it done. I've seen out of register tone up. They're just humans printing it. It's not done by Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
So,
it's too bad Joe isn't here because he was on the man press when in the 50s, and that was their life, you know, that press. And then when they went to the four color, Joe and I were at Bethel, I think 2 years when we were invited to be on the cover of an Awake magazine. It was pink. You know, we were pink. Anyway, so we thought the changes were better and better.
yeah.
You know,
But they could have done it sooner than they did. But they just.
Well, they didn't like to take instruction. That was a major thing that I found even in engineering. They just didn't like for people to come in. One man who was into work in accounting, he told Joe and I that he was there for a month. He said, oh, I'm so disgusted. He said, I can't wait to leave. He said, they don't take suggestions here.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
They're the smartest person in the room. They know everything.
That's right. And consequently, look where that ended. It ended for them. Maybe it was unavoidable, you know, because the world was changing so dramatically everywhere on this issue. And pretty soon we might have no boxes at all, and then you'll have to be out of a job or change yours.
I'm hoping I'll be retired by then.
Yeah. Well,
I got less than 18 years to go.
Well, it looks to me that you enjoy it, and that's you know, that's wonderful. When we talked initially about the child abuse issue, because who would think that the second largest printery, really, Watchtower is a big second largest publishing house in the world. Reader's Digest was the first, as far as when I was a young woman in this organization, and never dreamed. Everything was to do with doctrine, teaching and doctrine. I never dreamed we would have the kind of issues and that what this organization has become. Legally fighting for its life over an issue that has really something that they never were interested in, children. They really weren't. And even though they did have kids in ministry school, they're even trying to deny to governments, as we learned when Stephen Unthank was on here a few weeks ago, that they're trying to deny that they had anything to do with kids entirely in the organization. No programs for kids, and because that means liability, so they want to take the opposite.
So there was a program called I forget what it was called now. Support a Pioneer or something. No, it wasn't that. It was Pioneer Assist Program, where elders would assign pioneers to work with young children who didn't have spiritual parents. That was an actual program that they actually had.
I would like to know the date of that and the time.
I don't remember. It was before 2015, and it was after I was married. So it was in 97 to 2015. I don't remember all my dates. I know when we went to the contribution arrangement for tax purposes, that was 1991. I remember when did we switch over from you had to do an RBC to it was up to you. Tell
them what RBC stands for.
Regional Building Committee.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because many of the folk don't really realize that. And so you have a lot to discuss about the child abuse. And that's a subject that who wants to talk about it? But it has to be addressed. It is what it is. And
Yeah.
and it has really brought this organization to its knees. The Jehovah's Witnesses in it don't want to think that. And when they're hiding the numbers, as we'll talk about, um, it is a fact. So in your world, you came up to meet head-on child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you start on this, and then
Okay.
we'll work along to the we'll get to the grand jury.
Yeah. So in 1968, my grandmother, my mom's mom, so remember, she married a worldly person. They got divorced. My mom was 14. My grandmother married a witness in the congregation, and this is still in Baltimore, Maryland. And he started abusing my mom right away. So she was 14, and it was also interesting that that was the same year my mom met my dad. So it was the Washington D.C. International Convention in RFK Stadium in 1968. My mom and dad met, and my dad was 20, my mom was 14. My dad decided that day he was going to marry her, which is really creepy and really weird too, like a little groomerish. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about my step grandfather, and so he started abusing my mom the same year in '68. And my mom went to the congregation sermon because this is before the elder arrangement had come in
Yes,
'72.
before 72.
So yeah, so nothing happened, nothing. They didn't believe her, yada yada yada. So my grandparents had moved to Ohio to retire, so they lived right across the river from Wheeling, West Virginia, in the southeastern part of Ohio. And I never remember them living in Baltimore because they moved to, when they retired. So my parents had low-paying jobs, were always poor, never could make ends meet. They couldn't afford daycare. So in the summertime, either we were at my grandparents in York, Pennsylvania, on their farm working out, or we'd be in Ohio with my other grandparents. So we take turns. I'd be out of Ohio for a couple of weeks, and I'd be on the farm for a couple of weeks in York. So in '88, I was 11, and my brother and my sister were at my grandparents' house, and we saw my step grandfather, molest our cousin, who was also a witness. It was his biological granddaughter. It was my step cousin. So we went to the elders, and we went to my grandmother. They didn't believe us. My parents, we had a judicial committee, and during that judicial committee, the one elder on that panel, I remember this clear as day. It was 35 years ago. I still remember this. He goes to my mom before the judicial committee starts and said, "The statute of limitations have expired in your case, Jeannie. We can't hold what he did to you 20 years ago against him now." And I'm like, "What are statute of limitations?" First off, that's a made-up term for Watchtower. They don't have that term. He just made that up. Second, it was the weirdest judicial committee I ever was on. The elders were on the stage. My cousin, my mom, and I, and her mom were on the right side. My grandma was in the middle. He was on the left side, and we're all in the auditorium. And that's not how you do judicial committees. It's not a court case. They did everything wrong. I found out later on that the elders owed him money who were on the judicial committee. He was not disfellowshipped. My grandma did leave us. She divorced and moved in with us in Pennsylvania, but she was not free to remarry until he died, of course. So I went to my mom and I'm like, "Why would you let us be there if you knew he abused you?" And she would not admit him. But the fact that the elder told me and my brother and her about it, I knew that she was abused. And she finally did admit it. And she said, "I thought Jehovah would heal him over the 20 years." But she put her daughter in that situation. Now, this guy didn't touch boys as far as I know. He only did girls. I never knew if my sister was molested. I never saw that. I saw my cousin. And so that's the training I got. You don't call the police. You call the elders. So in 2005, I was a ministerial servant, and a lot of the elders in my congregation were very lazy. They did not like service at all. So when you had a special assembly day on Saturday, there was no meeting on Sunday, and they went to me and said, "Martin, can you take the group out for field service tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure, I'll take the group out for field service." So a teenage boy, My wife had a Bible study. She left right away. A teenage boy. I couldn't find my daughter. I couldn't find her anywhere. And there was a big bush around the in the lobby, and I saw him, touching her. And well, I might maybe imagine it. I asked her. She said, okay. So I told my wife. I didn't do anything about it. The following Wednesday, out in field service, I'm handing out territory assignments. My wife is in the bathroom changing my son. He wasn't potty trained by this time, and I can't find my daughter again, Abby again, and I'm getting freaked out now because he's here. I saw him, and so I knock on the bathroom door. My wife says she's not in here. She's not in there, and the elders' room is locked, and I'm panicking. And but there was 2 doors to the elders' room. There was also a door behind the literature counter. So I go in the other door, and then I see what's happening. So I grab her, I screamed at him. We contacted the elders. His father admitted it, but when the elders found out about it, he denied admitting it. I found out later on when I became an elder that he had abused a girl in the previous congregation, and then later on when they moved to Delaware, he also molested another girl in Delaware. So that was my time. I called the branch like I talked about earlier. And I was disciplined for calling the branch. Later on, the coordinator, I think it was 2007 when the coordinator arrangement came in. He yelled at me, said I'm causing divisions because I'm not talking to this person. And I'm like, he put my daughter. And then it was a horrible time. And but I still was a true believer. I thought Jehovah would, answer my prayers, and I thought things would get better. So I had that experience.
You thought it was an aberration. You thought it was just in your world. I mean, that's what individually people thought.
But
they thought, well, it was just in my family. We never hear of things like this.
But then 6 years later, when I became an elder, the way the elder body works, okay, again, they could have changed this. It's been 8 years since I left. And the way elder body works, every quarterly elders meeting, you got 2 quarterly elders meetings, and you have 2 quarterly elders meetings in conjunction with the circuit this year. So you have 4 quarterly elders meetings a year. You'll have routine elders meetings throughout the year, but that's the 4 main ones. So whenever a new elder is appointed, there was 2. There's me and another brother named Rob Secor were appointed April 1st, 2011. And they have to bring everybody up to speed. So they have to tell everybody's on reproof, restrictions. That way you don't call this person a prayer or whatever. And they went through all these, there's names listed on the agenda, all these people. And I found out that my daughter's case wasn't unique. There was 4 other cases of child abuse by 4 different other people in my congregation. So that's when it really, so I saw both sides. I saw it as a father of a victim, and I saw it as an elder.
Well, how in the world did this lead to the grand jury investigation? Now, there's quite a leap there. Now, I know what I did, but in your world, see, I did it because of what's happening in my world. And I felt that this is the only way, unless we could get government involved in investigating, this would never, ever stop. Children would be at the mercy of these predators. So,
yeah. So we, when my daughter was abused in 2005, we were told we couldn't tell anybody in the congregation that there was an abuser. In 2005, we were told that we could call the police if we wanted to, but we were encouraged not to because we didn't want to bring reproach upon Jehovah's
that's
name.
common statement, yes.
Yeah. So again, they said we can't stop you, but think about it. So we didn't call the police. 2016, my wife and I woke up. We called the police, and they investigated it, and he was arrested. He was extradited from Delaware, and he did have to do a plea deal. It was a slap in the wrist, but my daughter got some, justice in her case. I wish the person in York, Anna, who was abused had come forward. He could have got a bigger sentence. I wish the lady in Delaware, I don't know who her name is, I wish she would have came forward. Maybe we could have put him away longer. Maybe we could have put my uncle away. It's all, by the way, it's my uncle. That's my cousin who molested my daughter. It was my uncle's son. So my uncle John was an elder for decades, and he was deleted as an elder. And he moved from York, Anna to Red Lion, and he brought his pedophile son. And the reason why every elder is accountable, every elder should be arrested, is because the way it works is most people don't know. Maybe some people do know the way elders work with people moving in is there's a letter of introduction written for every person. You do not have to be an elder or minister or servant or pioneer. Every publisher who moves congregations, the service committee will write a letter, sign it, and they'll tell you about the new body of elders, what this person is. And the new body are instructed to read all the letters of introductions, but many elders are lazy, they don't. But he, in that letter of introduction, the elder body knew that he had molested a girl in that previous congregation. They did not warn anybody. They minimized it. And then they probably warned, I didn't write the letter of introduction in Delaware when he moved to Dagwood, but those elders knew about it. And then later on, he molested a girl down there. So every elder is responsible. Every elder should be held accountable, because if they know of a case of child abuse and that happens in their congregation, they could have stopped it. They could have prevented that happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why in Pennsylvania, I wish every state would pick up this investigation. In Pennsylvania, every elder if you follow every rule the Watchtower lays out to you, you could be held accountable. And do you really want to serve them for nothing? I didn't know until I left that when you call the legal department, there's chances that you're not talking to a lawyer. It could be a paralegal, it could be
That's
anybody.
exactly right.
I
It's been that
didn't
way
know
for
that.
years. Mm-hmm.
Also, they never give their name. They will never give their name
That's
when
right.
you're on a call about child abuse. I didn't know that until I was an apostate, because that lawyer does not want to be held accountable for giving legal advice that turns south.
Well, actually, they didn't even share it out of the service department for years. I think it took till 91 when the governing body made a decision that the service department had to share the information with the legal department. They would find out about it when it became a lawsuit. So, there was just so many spots that they could have fixed things and fixed them. But because children, marriage wasn't important. Then they start marrying. Then marriage is important, but having kids is not important. In fact, having kids has always been not an important thing in this group, because the end is near. The end is near.
Yeah.
So
and now they realize there's not enough kids to keep the organization going. Now they're panicking,
right.
and they realize
they aren't interested. The kids
they realize they messed up, because when I was a kid, all we had was the Bible storybook. That was it. There was nothing else. And now they've done so much more for kids to try to keep them entertained and engaged. The Bible storybook is a horrible book. We can make multiple videos, essays, and how that traumatized children. But as an awake apostate, I learned so much more child abuse. I knew it wasn't just in my congregation. I learned also that my dad served on a child abuse case in the East York congregation in 1984. Lied about that. Would have been 7, so there was a child abuse. I've learned that circuit overseer Fred Detler, who grew up in Red Line, who was my dad's idol. My dad loved Fred Detler. He's been accused multiple times of child abuse. Circuit overseer for decades. I've learned other people have been accused of child abuse. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And then, my wife was waking up during the Australian Royal Commission. So the fall of 2015, that's going on. And the numbers came out, and you had 60,000 publishers. You had 1,800 cases of child abuse among 60,000 publishers. The Catholics in Australia are about 23%, and they had 4,400 cases that we know of. So the chances of being molested as a Catholic compared to Jehovah's Witness is way higher as a Jehovah's Witness. So what does that show you? I thought we were God's one true organization.
Yeah.
We would make fun of the Catholics for decades about the child abuse incident, and it was worse than what their religion was doing.
Yes, I remember initially the powerful ones in this organization, when they compared to the Catholic Church, and they would say, "No, that's the organization that should go after. That's where all the child abuse is." But when you argue the point that that wasn't so as far as the numbers were concerned. There weren't that many witnesses compared to the Catholics. And so, the ratio was such that it was abominable how many of the witness kids were molested.
Yeah.
And many to this day have never spoken out either.
Yeah, I think it was 6 million Catholics in Australia, and they had 4,400 cases against 1,800 cases with 65,000. That's the math right there. Maybe it was only 5 million Catholics in Australia. It was 5 or 6 million. This was 9 years ago. I forget the numbers. I don't remember every number.
Well, they didn't change, and look what happened. And so that's a lesson, even for people, generally speaking, report child abuse. That's a
Yeah,
major.
just all they had
Shows.
to do 30 years ago, 40 years ago, call the police. That's it. Let the police discuss, call the police. And going back to my step grandfather's court case, judicial committee, the one elder actually said on the platform, I never forget this, I was 11, 36 years ago. He said, you know, because his daughter didn't like him, and his daughter made up a fake accusation. He actually said that no kids ever get molested. They all make it up to get attention. He actually said that on the platform. So, but again, we had three witnesses. We had Regina, we had my brother, and we had me. Three witnesses. For my the third time, the second time, my nephew cousin molested my daughter. It wasn't just me. I saw because there was an older sister with us out in service in my car group. She came. She walked in the room with me, and she saw him. And so then my uncle intimidated her and told her that she didn't see that. And the elder said, yeah, Doris said it didn't happen. But we talked about it for 2 hours out in field service that morning. Doris talked about it. She saw it, but she got so convinced. But there was three witnesses in that case, and the elders didn't want to believe me too. So even the rules, even when you have more than one witness, they don't want to believe you. They don't care. They really don't care.
Mm-hmm. That's because they care more about the organization than they do about people. You know, the members. They don't even call them members. But recently I heard of a case where there's a lot of cases that are coming out still. It's not over. And yeah. I heard of the one where the dad, he was actually charging the other men in the congregation to have sex, charging them for sex with children, the girls. And it's taken the girls years. They're in their 40s. I think the average for a man to come forward on when he's abused is 52, I think. Girls tend to speak earlier about their abuse. Yeah. But still, it takes a long time to face up to reporting it. You face up, you know you were molested, but you live with it. But to get, and is there justice? Not 100% justice. You can't undo it. The thing is to prevent it. And so you report it so that the perpetrator, be a man or a woman, doesn't get to the next kid. And that's a major issue here. Years ago, people didn't think it was so traumatic to be abused.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we know differently now.
October 2005, when my daughter was abused, there was another girl in the neighboring congregation that was being abused by an adult woman, a Jehovah's Witness, at the exact same time. Different person, different victim, different perpetrator. So the circuit officer knew about that, knew about my daughter. And then, so in 2016, she actually started a lawsuit against Watchtower, like 11 years later. It took her that much time to get the courage to do that. And then I found out about it. And then I was like, I'm going to testify against Watchtower because Watchtower was blaming the elders were blaming the Watchtower. And here I had two different things. So Watchtower fought and fought and fought for weeks not to let me testify. And now the court case went south before I even got to testify. I'm not saying that I'm the man who got them to settle, but I was driving to Philadelphia to testify when they settled a couple hours before I got on the stand. So I was in the car when the lawyer called me. So that took her 11 years to come forward. It could take people, whatever. But this was happening everywhere. And it's not going to stop until they're held accountable or their organization's no more. But again, it's not just them. Anytime you put ultimate power in somebody's hand, they're going to abuse it, no matter what you're doing. So don't ever give your whole life over to a political organization, a religious movement, or anything. You can have fun. You can go out and do something. You can be passionate about causes. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't give up your whole way of life to that cause.
Yes, that's a good point to focus on. And that's what we all did. But we were part of a generation that did that. We accepted that as a natural thing. And then you see the outcome of it, and you wish you hadn't, but then changes are made. What can you do is you learn by your mistakes, and life goes on. But in in such a case of like yours, where here you had this awful situation with your daughter, but as time goes on, you recognize that this wasn't happening just to one child here and there, but it's happening a lot. And how did you get known to the authorities after? For instance, I'm gonna read something here. The newspaper article, April 19th, 2023. The title is "Charges Put Focus on Jehovah's Witnesses' Handling of Abuse." It's an Associated Press article. And you're quoted here quite a lot. This is when Pennsylvania Attorney General Michelle Henry took over from
Josh Shapiro.
Shapiro. And she announces the charges. Said some of the defendants even used their faith communities to prey upon the victims. Now that is the truth, especially when those in the faith community are not cognizant of this type of thing that could happen. We're not warned it could happen. I was warned as a Catholic girl by my mother about child molestation, and she didn't necessarily say that it was priests that would do this. She just warned me. So it's up to parents to warn their children, and I think that that is happening more and more. The press covers this, especially with religion. So you left the organization in 2016. And you spoke to the investigators that responded to what I did, and I felt obligated to do this. And so I wrote in this article, it said, Barbara Anderson of Tennessee worked for a decade at the denomination's central offices in New York and spoke with investigators with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office after calling for an investigation into the organization's handling of abuse. Actually, it was two investigators that actually came here to our house. She said she was gratified to see the state taking action, because it was a losing battle to get the organization. I tried to get the heads of the organization to do something about this. And then for punishment, as it says, Anderson was excommunicated from the church in 2002 after speaking out on the subject on a Dateline NBC broadcast. So here you are. How did you get introduced to the government?
Okay, well, so in 2016, I actually called news media up. I called multiple reporters. I called multiple local channel stations. Nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to cover it. But within 2 years after, in 2018, everything changed. In 2018, I was interviewed at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I was on the front page. The Harrisburg Patriot, our state capital in Pennsylvania, York Daily Record, our local county paper, and then I was in 2 documentaries. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So actually, the lawyer who I talked about earlier, who's going to testify against Watchtower, he has sued Watchtower multiple times and won every single time. His name is Jeff Fritz out of Philadelphia.
Yes, I know.
So if you want to sue Watchtower, look up Jeff Fritz. I mean, excuse me, sorry about that. He's an awesome guy. He cares about people. So Mr. Fritz called me. Okay, we were still talking. My daughter doesn't want to sue. We never actually filed a lawsuit, and I can't sue. It's her. I'm not the victim. She is. So it's fine. She doesn't want to sue. She doesn't have to. I'm not going to force her to do it. But we were talking about filing a lawsuit against Watchtower, and he called me up and said, "Hey, there's some guys from the Attorney General's office want to talk to you. Would you be willing to talk to them?" And that was the summer. I think it was June of 2019. So they came to my house, and they were there probably for 2 or 3 hours. And I talk really fast. I get really passionate. And they told me multiple times, "Hey, slow down." So, because they didn't know the terminology. They didn't know pioneer.
That's right. And explain it all.
They didn't know the hierarchy. They didn't understand how the circular overseer worked, why they rotate the circular overseers every 3 years. why is the circuit overseer culpable in these things? Because every time there's wrongdoing, elder commits fornication or child abuse or anything, the circuit overseer knows about that. So, and I, then they wanted I don't know why they wanted a Bible. Then I got a reasoning book. Then I don't know how many times they came into the house. I went into Harrisburg, talked to them multiple times, and the chief investigator, he would call me up and run names, and he would ask questions, and he said, "Hey, I don't understand, why did this happen?" I'm like, "Well, probably because of this and this and this." And then he called me back the next day or texted me and said, "Hey, you were right. This is why they did that." So for multiple years, now 2020, the whole investigation shut down during the pandemic. The grand jury expired because of the pandemic, and they had to call a new grand jury, which is the nice thing to so, because a different judge can say, no, you don't have anything. But here, multiple judges said there's enough evidence here to call a second grand jury to go again. So I had the privilege of testifying for a long time in the Harrisburg, the grand jury, and it was a surreal experience, And
they knew what questions to ask once you explained. That's what Joe and I, once we explained the operation of the group, the organization, and that you explained it to them. But what was so fascinating to me, their experience with 5 years of a grand jury investigation into the Catholic Church made them aware and really, really wonderful to deal with. In fact, I had long talks with the one who was headed of the Catholic investigation, and it was like talking to a close relative. I mean, he understood everything because maybe the lingo as names of things are different, but really it's the way to hide it is all the same. So
they opened up to questions for the grand jury if they had any questions for me. And the whole time I'm doing my testimony, I'm talking to the lawyer. I'm not looking at the grand jury. So I stop right after I'm finished, and I turn over and I see everybody, and everybody's like this. And I'm like, it was like, so I think I hope I helped. You know what I mean? 14 men have been arrested so far in conjunction. I mean, nobody's guilty until they're innocent until they're proven guilty. I don't want to, but I'm pretty sure they're guilty. One committed suicide. He didn't want to be taken by the cops. So one fled to Puerto Rico, which I heard a funny story. That person thought that they would escape extradition, but the problem is Puerto Rico is not another country; it's part of the United States. So they had to. All the Pennsylvania, the police force and the Attorney General's office, all they had to do was book a ticket to Puerto Rico and pick them up and bring them back to Pennsylvania. So it's an honor, it's a privilege. I can't go back and fix things. You know what I mean? Case in point, I don't want to get too graphic here. Let's just say there was a kid my age in the Red Line congregation. His mom ran a daycare. He was in his 20s and he was still living at home. And he performed a sexual act in front of an entire room full of toddlers in early 2000s. So they were all non-witnesses. They were worldly people. So of course the kids went to their parents and told them. Of course the guy was arrested. Of course he was put in jail. And of course he was on the Megan's Law website. And I kept asking, what happened to him? What happened to him? The elders lied to me. Oh, he got a job in Scranton. Well, he was in a jail in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He didn't get a job there. They knew what happened. I wish I could have warned other kids and parents in the congregation. I wish I would have left Watchtower in 2005. I wish it wasn't the fact that we were instructed by headquarters to throw away every single knowledge book, Live Forever book, reasoning book, commentary letter King James, the happiness book, all those books that predicted the Armageddon by the end of the 20th century had to be thrown away, could not be given out. That was my last thing. That was the last straw. I wish it was the child abuse that I woke up. I wish it wasn't because of throwing away books. The books that I studied the Live Forever book. That's the book I got baptized in. The knowledge book. All those books were thrown away. That was my last meeting in 2016. That was my wake-up call. I wish I could do things differently, but I can't. I can only be a better person now.
No, because knowledge was drummed into our head. Every meeting, everywhere you went to with witnesses, it was always knowledge. This means everlasting, taking in knowledge. It wasn't how to raise your children. It wasn't how to help your fellow man to survive, other than give them knowledge door to door. You couldn't give them food. You couldn't give anybody who was starving. They looked down upon you. I had to keep a secret when I did that. So they put the emphasis on the wrong thing. And so the results are what we see today. And those who hang in there, if that makes them happy, that's their business. But it's all going to end because there is no reason for it to stay around. And I say that over and over again. But our country it's embroiled in other issues right now. I do think that the organization is going to be looked at again and again on crime. It isn't just child abuse that they're hiding. There are other crimes, and you're going to tell us a little bit about some of those things that you noticed over the years about the reporting publishers, the numbers that you have discovered how they play with numbers.
Yeah. So these are two separate topics, but they kind of relate. Again, I'm a numbers guy. I love numbers. So if anybody's old watching this, the January 15th Watchtower had the centerfold. It wasn't a beautiful woman. It was the numbers of last year report. Right. Sorry, bad joke. But so the yearbook would come out every month. Our Kingdom Ministry would have the 48 states, because Hawaii and Puerto Rico and Alaska had their own branches back there. So it's just the 48 states every month, up and down, 700,000, 800,000. So I love numbers. I would write down in my little book when I was during the meetings how many countries had over 100,000 publishers. So it was growth, because remember, we had less than 3 million publishers in 1980 in the whole world. I shouldn't say they. And then by 1990, it was 4 million. So they doubled. They doubled in 10 years. They went from 2 million to 4 million in 10 years. When I became a publisher in 85, we had 3 million. By 1990, it was 4 million. From 1990 to 2000, it went from 6 to 8. Another 2 million growth. That's not 100%. That's only like a 50% growth. They didn't double, but they went up, 20, And then by 2000 to 2010, the organization went from 6 to 8. And they're still at 8. So it's been 14 years. They're still at 8 million. They have not hit 9. And I don't think they ever will hit 9. So they only grew by 2 million. But if they would have grown by 100%, they could have went from 6 to 12, or you know what I mean. If they kept that growth rate of the 80s. So I didn't know this until I was a service here. But when I was in Redline, we had 135 publishers. I moved over to Prospect, the old East York congregation. They needed help. One elder had committed suicide. One had died of cancer. They had 4 elders. They were all in their 70s and 80s. So I come in. I'm like 30 something. They made me the service here within 2 weeks. I was the youngest elder by 40 years. They had 97 publishers. Weird thing is, my dad was in that congregation. It used to be called the East York congregation. They renamed it the Prospect congregation. I have no idea why. So my dad was a Watchtower conductor. And the coordinator was the presiding overseer 30 years earlier, and the secretary was still the secretary. Now I'm serving on the service committee the body that my dad served on. And so, little young boy comes home, makes good. And I didn't realize this until I was a service overseer, that if you miss a month, say you missed June, you had time, you didn't put it in. Well, August, they want to get everybody's time in, right? And so you were supposed to go to all the shut-ins, all the handicapped, disabled, sick, elderly people who had depression because they couldn't live up to Watchtower's things. And you were supposed to ask them, did you have any time in June or May or July? And they'd be like, no. Well, I did give a tract to the lady at Walmart when I checked out. Well, you had time. So August, the reason why the month of August was always the highest peak every single year, because August, they wanted to make sure everybody was regular. And we would actually go back and say, you would count that same person 4 or 5 times. If they didn't put any time in for June and July and August, I mean June and July, then they had time for June and July. You would count that person 3 times or 4 times, and now they're not regular or inactive. They are a regular publisher. It was so crazy. I didn't know that. So sometimes we would go from like 90 publishers reporting to like 115. But it's the same 97 people. It's not, 20 people didn't come in that month.
Mhm.
And they were just counting them double. So you could never trust that numbers. Those numbers
That's
are all
right.
fabricated.
And when I asked about it, when I was in the writing department, and I asked how do they count? What procedure? Everybody clammed up. And I said, don't ask.
I only ever met one person in the service department my entire life. I know hundreds of Bethelites, never only met one person. This before was electronic. This was 30 years ago. He told me that report's never accurate because he quote said 400 congregations don't get their service report in at the end of the month when they're the 6th. So they don't get reported in the Kingdom Ministry article box, the bottom of the Kingdom Ministry. And I said, it's the same 400 congregations. Why don't you tell the servant? No. He said, it's not the same 400 congregations. On average, it's 400 congregations, and out of the 10,000 United States don't put their time in, so they don't get counted. I said, so I'm like, oh, shocked. They don't get counted. He goes, no. They'll get counted the next month. So it's not just a factor of just 5 or 6 witnesses getting counted double, triple. Imagine 400 congregations don't get counted in July's report, but they get counted in August. Well, you just went up 400 congregations from the last month. You didn't grow any. Never mind. I'm sorry. So that was my problem. I didn't like that. I didn't like, because like my grandmother was baptized in 1960. She had a stroke in 2010, and I was still in her congregation. And my aunt was so worried that she was not going to get resurrected. This woman could not communicate. She could not walk, and she made sure that she could count 15-minute increments because that was the privilege they opened up, And then she would make me, and I did it because I love my grandmother. I would drive around and make calls, and my grandma would sit in the car, and she said, "Make sure you turn time in for your grandmother. You make sure you turn. She can't be inactive." I'm like, Carol, she has won. She's successful. She's stayed faithful her whole life. Jehovah's not going to kill her in Armageddon. She's going to get resurrected if she dies. Relax. But my aunt was so crazy that this poor woman had to be pulled out of her, bed and driven around in a car, not talk to anybody, not get out of the car, but just being in the car was service time for my grandmother. So I'm sorry, I'm a little angry about that, but yeah, that was the level of reporting my parents, my family did, and the congregation did. But I want to talk about money really quickly, about
Yes.
corruption in the
Yes.
organization,
Mhm.
because this has been going on for decades, hundreds of years. The miracle wheat, that was true. It's not an apostate life.
Yes,
It's a
of
lie.
course.
The miracle wheat was in it. Whatever. But like so my step grandfather, my maternal grandfather, before I realized he was a child abuser, he loved construction. So he was on the RBC. So back in the 80s, you could go on the RBC builds, quick builds, as a non-witness. I mean, as a child, you didn't have to be an adult to be on the builds until a young girl was killed in Ohio in 1991, 92. She was killed by a pettibone. That's when they said you had to be 16 or older to be on the quick build. So the time I was 5 years old, I was helping my grandfather. I'd be bagging sand up. You'd be in the brick line. You'd be in the insulation line, little things to help out little kids. So I saw RBC, the 2 builds, go up. In the 80s, you didn't have to do the quick build. You could do it yourself. You could build your own Kingdom Hall, or you could do the RBC. So 85, I was 8 years old. Our congregation bought an abandoned warehouse. We remodeled it into a Kingdom Hall. It took us six months to do it, and it's still there, still serving as a Kingdom Hall as far as I know. That was I was in that congregation from 84 to 87. I moved back there in 2011. No, I'm lying to you. 2013. 2013, I was there for 3 years, woke up in that congregation, but I helped build that hall in 85. They remodeled in 2000. I wasn't there in 2000. That hall never had a loan. It was all local donations, local friends. Never had a loan from headquarters. When they remodeled, the friends got the money together. During that remodel, that gutting, the roof collapsed in the garage, and 2 witnesses were trapped in it. And there's witnesses in the area who are concrete people. And on Saturday afternoon, I was actually in the basement with my brother in the garage, and we didn't have enough food for the workers. So my dad told my mom to go out and get pizza. So we come back, and the building was collapsed. So both brothers survived. They got hundreds of witnesses came from all over and they got a crane in there from witness on the crane. They got the whole thing cleared. They rebuilt the garage. That was a highlight. People said how great that was, but it should never happen. If you know what you're doing, you should not have been through. They were stripping the roof off of the auditorium and throwing it on the garage. That's why it collapsed, because they're idiots. So they talk about the benefits, but it should never have collapsed in the first place. So my uncle, who's also in construction, he built pole buildings. He had his own construction company. Their Kingdom Hall needed a new hall, and they had the RBC come in, and he told me it would be $250,000. This was 30 plus years ago in the 80s. And he said, rip off, that's way too much money. I can build a hall cheaper than that. And so in 89, the local elders built their Kingdom Hall in Yorkana for less than $200,000. Okay, with land, septic tank, everything. And he said, there's no way it should cost that much money. It's a ripoff. Now, I remember him saying that. So sometime in the 90s, they changed it where you had to do the RBC. You could not build by yourself because I don't know what year it was. I was a kid, but in 97, Reading, Pennsylvania, the Mount Penn congregation of Reading did not want to do an RBC. They wanted to build themselves. The circumcision and the RBC said you had to do it. The entire body of elders were removed. They brought in new elders. They said, okay, we're going to do the RBC because it was a financial incentive. They made money on the loan. It was 6% interest. Then it was 3%. Then they took the interest off, but they overcharged for it because I talked to multiple people in the accounting offices at the RBC bills, and they always said it should not cost this much. I don't have proof. I don't have documentation, but I do know a witness, a ministerial servant who worked for Cracker Barrel, who was a district manager, and he said I could cater the food from Cracker Barrel, and it'll be cheaper than what they're charging us for the food here that are made by the Friends. There's no chefs here. How could it cost this much money? So I just have these stories. In 2007, because our Kingdom Hall Red Line was a quick build, bad wiring, it burned down to the ground. And we had to rebuild our Kingdom Hall. And they said it'd be $50,000 to demolish it and haul it away to the landfill. Local landfill, like a mile from Kingdom Hall, said, hey, you can dump it all here for free. We're not going to charge you anything. So guess what? That $50,000 had to go back to headquarters. We couldn't keep it or anything like that. Again, even though our hall was paid off of. And then the last thing I want to talk about corruption, I don't want to talk forever here. So right before I woke up in 2015, they went from the RBC to the LDC, Local Design Committee.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up really quick. So Prospect, Red Line, no hall loans. Those two halls I served as an elder. We had the Kingdom Hall Assist program. You're supposed to give $1 a month per publisher. That'd be all the money we needed to build Kingdom Halls. So that box went away in 2015. We were supposed to pass slips around the hall and see how much money they would donate. Well, the Friends said $853. That was what the Friends said. That was supposed to come out of local needs funds. But guess what? The Friends never donated that much money. So we were running out of money in our account in 2015. Secretary decided, let's cut it to $425. My last meeting with the circuit overseer, the fall of 2015, said, the Friends said they're going to give $853 a month. They have to give $853 a month. But that was like, so you make them give $853 a month. It was a shakedown. It was forced tithing. It was a way to extract more money from the Friends because the Kingdom Hall Assist program usually took in $100 to $150 a month, and now you're getting $800. We never had a loan, so they forgave all the loans, people who still had them, but then they got more money from the local congregations. This also happened at the circuit assemblies. If you're an elder and you went to the business meeting, you know what I'm talking about. The congregation, some overseer would say, hey, we need this much money. If the Friends don't donate that, each congregation has to write a check to me or to the quick assembly hall. But that assembly hall was built in 75. Why do we need $8,000 for 2 days? Why does it cost $8,000 for lights and water? How could it cost that much money for a Saturday and Sunday convention? If there's no loan, it's not. There's nothing. It was built 35. Now it's 45 years ago. It was built. So that's corruption. That's fraud. And the circuit overseer release program, the insurance that we had to pay, it was a forced donation. There are tax laws in the United States where donations are not taxable. But if you force people to donate a certain amount, that is not a donation. That is a non-taxable. That is a taxable fund. So they're using money that should be taxed, and they're paying off child abuse lawsuits. They're paying off other crimes. So again, the fraud is so prevalent. I wish I would have kept more documents as an elder, but this is just my stories, and that's all I have.
Yes, but people wonder about things like that, and there were no answers, but there are answers. People like you were involved in it, and you saw it with your own eyes, and eventually it took its toll on you. The practices of the Watchtower, the policies and practices of the Watchtower organization has led it to its death's door. And yeah. And so it's not the religious belief. The religious belief you could take or leave. You know that people love the belief and they stick with it, but they can't put up with the what you've been explaining. These transactions. That
one more transaction. So my father-in-law moved to Arizona in 2006. My father-in-law was an elder. My wife's dad. He moved to Arizona in 2006. They were driving to Cottonwood, Arizona for their Kingdom Hall. And the friends had a lot of money in Camp Fruity, a lot of money. They had $250,000 just sitting in the bank waiting to get approval to build the Kingdom Hall. And the branch kept delaying because they were switching over to the LDC. They didn't know why. January 2015, Watchtower says, all your money you have, send to us, give it to us. And you can only keep $5,000 in your local friends. Because a lot of congregations had a building emergency in case the roof needed replaced, or the furnace went out, or the air conditioning went out. You can't keep any money. So my father-in-law's congregation set $250,000 in 2015. That was 9 years ago, no Kingdom Hall. They stole that money. That's proof. There's proof right there. So, sorry.
Yeah.
Not a good person, but
I should put you with someone else who I know who has a story that's very similar with a purchase of a large building that was over $1 million that the friends put the money out to buy it for circuit assemblies, and they never did build on it, and they kept telling them the brothers to keep the building up and to make sure that it doesn't fall apart, rack and ruin over this time. And 5 years later, they sold it for they took all the money. They sold it for I think $4 million. Kept kept it all. That how did they think, or do they think they do? They think that they can keep doing that and nobody cares.
What about Puerto Rico? Hurricane Maria destroyed the assembly halls and a lot of Kingdom halls. The assembly hall that the people flew in, took vacation off work, took on time, paid to fly to Puerto Rico to rebuild the assembly hall. They sold it. Disgusting.
Well, we're not part of that anymore, and there are benefits to not being part of that. So, in conclusion, tell us the benefits of leaving a cult.
You can do whatever you want to. You can grow facial hair. At the time, I couldn't have a beard. Now you can.
I don't want to grow facial hair.
Okay, that's fine. I saw my first R-rated movie at 38, 39 years old. My kids can do whatever they want to. They can be gay if they want to. They can be. I don't care. And I don't have to shun them. My daughter had her boyfriend live with us for 2 years. He moved out since then. I don't care. They don't care about that. So as long as they're not hurting anybody, I don't care. The cool thing is my two uncles, my mom's two brothers, I didn't talk about them. They both were drafted during the Vietnam War. They both were baptized witnesses in Baltimore, and they both got this fellowship in the 1960s for getting drafted and not fighting it. I never saw them. The one I saw once in 1982, the other one I saw once in 89, and my grandma was getting open heart surgery, and so he showed up, and I got to reconnect with them. And I learned to have a cousin. Never knew I had a cousin. So on my mom's side, they live in California. But this year we're going to get to fly out to California and visit them again. So I've seen them a couple times since I woke up. That's a benefit. I lost more family, but I gained some family back. It's just happiness. I can sleep in on Sunday morning. I can do what I want to do, and I can help people, truly help people. If you need help,
if you
give me a
decide
text, give me a call.
You're free. I'm
free.
The whole point. You're free.
I can think for myself, and I don't have to judge people because I like being an elder, but I hated disfellowshipping people. I hated telling people they had to do more. I don't have to do that. Just as long as you don't hurt people and you don't force your beliefs on me, I don't care what you do. Just don't break the law and just be happy.
Some people like to tell others what to do. The, the,
Yeah.
the job
Not
is
me.
filled by some people who like to have power over others. So that's the world we live in. And we have made a choice which we're condemned for, which some would kill us for.
Yeah.
If they had the power to do so. But the experiences you gave, we appreciate them so much. And what you did working along with the grand jury, and more is yet to come. Thank you very much for doing this. You have a wealth of information in your brain, and
It's a large head, though. I have a very big head, so it should be something filled there besides rocks, you know.
Well, it's a gem. Your brain is a gem. It's some people don't like that kind of gem. You know, we have choices there too, and but we those who are listening to these type of programs appreciate the input, and then we make decisions upon the input. We're not forced to make the decisions. Isn't that wonderful?
If you want to be a witness, I don't care.
That's
be
right.
a witness. Make yourself. If you need that to be happy, and you need a purpose in your life, and without that you have no purpose, then do it. Go ahead, do it. Right. Just don't knock on my door, though. Please don't. You know, then don't tell me that I have to be a witness.
Hey, Barbara and Martin.
Yes.
You know, just a lot of people have been coming in here tonight. I'd like to keep Martin on if you can hold on another 10 minutes or so.
Sure, yeah. Any questions people have? I don't mind answering questions.
That's why I was going to ask you. You know, I forgive me for my ignorance, but I knew the name Martin HAugh. I just knew that, and I was trying to put two and two together. So then when you started talking with Barbara, I could see that you were the fellow that was in the Philadelphia Inquirer, like you said. I saw that whole spread.
Yeah.
That was amazing, Martin. I'll tell you that really, I'll tell you, that was one of the biggest, I would say, events to happen in the ex-witness world in years. That was
my mom will not. That article came out 6 years ago in April, and my mom will not forgive me because even last month she'll randomly text me and yell at me and call me a liar because I said the word "wake" in there. But my brother wasn't woken up yet. My brother was still a witness, and he was there, and my sister was there, and my former brother-in-law, she was there too, and they all told me the same story. My sister-in-law told me my brother's wife that they drank beer. It was all my dad's side of the family, and said, we got to close ranks. We got to move forward. They're spiritually dead. That's a wake to me. That's if you're drinking and commemorating about a dead spiritual person, you're having a wake. Maybe I shouldn't have said the word, but my mom cares more about that than about kids being abused. That shows you what a wicked person she is.
Unbelievable. You know,
the results are what we see when the arrests are being made and the children are not at risk. So the results, why doesn't your mother and other people realize the issue is the lives of people? And yet they refuse to acknowledge it.
And when I told her about the abuse, she says, stop abusing me. I'm not abusing you. You're attacking me. I'm just telling you facts about your religion, your cult.
Hey, Martin, in fact, I've got a bunch of relatives. In fact, my father, he's 100 years old. He lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. He's not actually in Temple, Pennsylvania. You know what that is, right?
Yep.
202, I believe it is. But anyways, he lives down there with my witness clan, all my relatives. He lives with them. Now, do you know some of the people from Temple? Did you know the Lamberts?
No, sorry. I was always in central Pennsylvania. So York County is just south of Harrisburg. I mean, we went to Philadelphia, the Veterans Stadium, for 20 years for the conventions. And then we went to, Philadelphia and Reading, Pennsylvania at the Santander Arena. Right. I don't know a lot of witnesses over in Philadelphia. Sorry, no.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just curious. But anyways, let's listen. Now, you folks have been listening in. We got a lot of people on our radio telephone line. You've seen Martin. Martin had a big spread in the Inquirer, Philadelphia Inquirer. What was that, back in 22, Martin?
2018.
Oh, 2018. It goes back that far? Wow.
Yeah,
boy, a big spread in 23 in the Associated.
Yeah. I've been on 2 documentaries. I've been on, the Harrisburg Patriot News. I've been on other newspapers too. The AP ran The funny thing about the AP story, I interviewed me, Peter Smith from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then my local paper took that article, rewrote it, and used my pictures without even talking to me, which is really strange. But that's what the AP is for. It's a news wire service that local, and they slanted it like a local boy does good, which is fine by me. So people are like, I was getting text messages from workmates, dude, you're on the Sunday paper again. Knock it off. You know, it's like I don't want to see your ugly head when I'm drinking my coffee. You know, so.
Well, you're a courageous man, Martin. You're a courageous man. Yeah.
We were told to be bold, be proud of your witnesses, stand up for your beliefs. So
Well, this is where it was born. This is where it was born, right? Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Yep.
And
started in Pennsylvania. I want Pennsylvania to end it.
And ended. It will end in Pennsylvania. I'm a prophetess.
Well, let's see if we can't get some people to call into you. Listen, if you'd like to say hello to Martin, you know who he is. He did a great job on the interview we had here tonight with Barbara. He really spilled the beans on the Watchtower. This man is a real activist. He's doing a fine job. Why don't you come in and say hello, Martin? Give him a pat on the back. I'd love to have you talk to him. Just say hello to him. He's on here with us tonight. Go ahead and hit *6. Hit *6 on your telephone pad and say hello to Martin. My goodness, let's make that happen. Well, Martin, I have to tell you something. I mean, I was super impressed. See, Barbara threw me off tonight when she said when she wrote me the email about you coming on. She says now his name is Martin, and he pronounces it. She said that it's Martin. I mean, everyone knows how to pronounce Martin, right, Barbara?
I know.
So I got kind of thrown off. I was focusing more on the Martin than on the HAugh, but I knew who Martin was. Yeah,
I got a funny story for you.
It was Martin that wrote that to me and phonetically wrote it out instead of the way I would have pronounced it as HAugh.
I have a funny story. My sixth great grandfather was in Gettysburg, but 1860 census, they came out to his door and it was Andrew, Hawk, but in 1863 it was Haugh. So even in 1860 he pronounced it hawk like a bird with a K, you know, because that's what the census wrote down when he said out loud. So I don't know why my answers are pronounced with there's no K in it. I don't know.
Yeah,
My wife was joking we should change our name to Hawk because I don't want to be associated with my dad's side of the family, but you know, it is what it is.
Well, I'm glad you came on. Now, do have we got Linda James, Apostle Babe. What do you want to say, Linda?
Hi, Martin. This is Apostle Babe, Linda James. I just wanted to say thank you for being one of those elders that admits what you did wrong, and that when you knew better, you did better. This is Maya Angelou. When you know better, you do better, and you have personified that. And I thank you for that. You've admitted the stuff you did wrong, and you've also admitted ways you fixed it or did things right. So thank you. You're a good example of elders that are work now.
I just fellowship this young lady named Beth, and I still feel bad. I broke her communication with her parents. I just feel disgusted. Who am I to judge other people? I'm nobody. I had no right to do that. I was the chairman of that judicial committee, and I still feel sick. I'm sorry. I still feel sick to my stomach. I took her away from her family. So yeah, I'll never forgive myself for those things that I did. And I can't make up for the things I did, you know, but I can do the best I can. But yeah.
Yes, you can. And you're showing that you're doing that. I appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I want to share with you. Let me just add the coulda, shoulda, woulda. We all go through that. All we can do is what we can do today forward. You know, the shoulda, coulda, woulda. We just weren't equipped with what it took to do it at that time. Today we are, and we're functioning in that ability. You know, we're functioning in more freedom.
Well, we thought we would have was right. We thought we were right, and now we realize we aren't. So we admit it. Yeah. So that's what growth is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yeah,
I'll let you go now.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, we got 308. Go ahead, 308. You're on with Sailor Martin.
Hi, my name's Debbie Moore, and I second everything that Linda James just said. She did a good job of the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and the Maya Angelou comment too. But I want to thank you for coming out and doing everything you're doing. And you kind of took me back in memory lane when I remember when there was the congregation servant, when the elder arrangement began. My dad was an elder as soon as the elder arrangement began. And I used to really resent the witnesses or everybody that would call him, because back then the elders were called out in the middle of the night to settle arguments and all kind of things like that. But anyway, you took me way back. And then I was baptized in 1975, so I'm of that group too. And I remember about the printing. Anyway, thanks for the walk down memory lane, even though it hasn't turned out so good for us now. Well, actually, it has, because we're not still captives to such an evil organization. That I really appreciate that you stood up for what you knew was right, and you did a great job. And thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, they were disfellowship elders who spoke up, and that was the issue. If you wanted to help your brothers and remain an elder because you believed that you were helping, and what good were you if they disfellowship you? So it was a vicious cycle. So you kept quiet, not because you were evil. There were the evil people, definitely, but the majority, I have forgiveness in my heart because of the circumstances of the whole human element there. I mean, you were a loser if you did right. You were a loser if you were wrong. You know.
Well, I have to say too, Martin, that boy, a lot of people. I'm reading some of the comments here on YouTube. I don't know if you guys can see them or not.
I am reading too. Yeah.
A lot of people. In fact, I like this one. There's the numerous comments of how good you have helped the ex-witness world. I like this one. If more elders like Martin stood up for children, a lot of heartaches could have been avoided. Well, thank you for writing that. In fact, it just went on. I can't get the person's name. But see that they're all, Martin, I'm impressed by you. I really, really am. And, you're just an ordinary, hard-working man, kind of like me, work hard, go to work every day. You love your business that you're in, and yet you took the time. You didn't mind rocking the boat. Most people just say, no, I'm not going to do this, man. I don't want a full page spread of me on the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer. That took guts. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not scared of them. I'm not, they don't frighten me. You know what I mean? I don't hide where I live. If they want to, I'll stand up to them. The good thing is about Jehovah's Witnesses, most of them don't have guns, but a couple of them do. But they can't scare me. They can't intimidate me anymore. They stalked my house for about a month, maybe 2 months. We had to move because we lived like a half mile from the Kingdom Hall, even though I switched to another Kingdom Hall to help them out. So they would come by our house every day, elders knocking our doors. I told them to get out of there, and they stopped bothering us. But it's like, I'm not scared of them. They're really afraid people. There are really scared people themselves. They're scared of making the Circuit of the Seer mad. The publishers are scared of making the elders mad. Circuit of the Seer is scared of the headquarters. They are frightened people. They act tough, but they can't hold a candle to what I can do to them. So I'm not worried about them. Yes, but again, we were taught to go to the school with the school brochure and tell everybody that we don't celebrate birthdays. We're supposed to be vocal about it. We were supposed to go and knock on everybody's door. I had to knock on my friends at school's door. So why can't I use that with that training that they gave me to defend my faith now to expose my faith? And I'm not going to give up until I pass away or they're no longer an organization.
Well, we ditto that. I would like to conclude by saying the title of this interview was Exposing the Watchtower's Dark Side. Certainly, Martin, you did that, didn't you? You exposed the dark side.
Well, we thank you very much, Martin, for coming on. Thank you, Barbara. And Martin, you made my night. I really enjoyed the interview. I was sitting back here listening. You told a lot of things that people had to hear. And one thing
Write
before we cut,
write a book.
I know. I thought about that.
Well, one thing too before I cut you loose, if you don't mind, take another second or two. One person's asking there if you know anything about Toni Morris and maybe anything about Pennsylvania that he's involved in?
No, I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I would have. See, they won't tell me. The investigators. So basically, what they do is they'll run a name by me, and they'll say, "Hey, we had allegations. You know this person? Yes or no?" They never ran his name by me. I don't know. I'm going to say one thing though about the organization. They told me I don't want to get in trouble here, but they did. They do know who the governing body is. Even though they separate themselves, they have subpoenaed them. They've driven to Warwick and subpoenaed them. The gate people told them that they don't reside on earth, so they're in heaven. They're a spiritual governing body. The gate people actually lied to the investigators. So this is before Tony Morris left, though. So I don't know. I wish I would have. Again, they've been investigating this since 2019. It's been 5 years. It took 5 years with the Catholic. I'm hoping the report comes out. If you read the Catholic report, it was pages after pages after pages. All I want is this to be a part of the written record of every congregation, in Pennsylvania, and I wish every state would do the exact same thing. So if my closing word is I talk way too much, if you live in Arizona or New Mexico or Denver or Minnesota, call your AG's office. See if you can do what Barbara did. See if you can get an investigation started. So maybe every state should do this. I would love for the grand jury of Virginia or Pennsylvania to kick it up to the FBI and do a nationwide investigation. That's the next step, and that's what we have to do. If enough AGs talk to the FBI, the government can put resources and really bring them to their knees.
Well, there you go. My goodness gracious, good narrative on that. Well, Martin, thank you. You're a good man. Don't you ever change, Martin. You just keep saying Martin, and don't you ever give in, up or out. Keep waving that flag of victory. Thank you very much, Martin. All right, we're going to end the program there, but we have more to come tonight. We have JW World News. That's coming up next right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. So don't go anywhere. And we're going to end this program here. And we thank all the people that commented, the people who called in as well. JW World News coming up next. Thank you. All right.